Another school tragedy shooting is in the news. A U.S. senator travels to El Salvador to meet with an illegal felon, an illegal alien who committed felonies in the United States. And tariffs continue to dominate the news cycle. This is The Truth. I'm John Gordon. We've got a great program for you this Easter weekend. I hope you will stay tuned. We're going to talk to Braden Sorbo, an outstanding young man who has written a book about defending masculinity. And serendipitously, without my knowledge beforehand, we have an interview with Sam Sorbo, who happens to be Braden's mother, and she has written a book about homeschooling children. And then we're going to talk to Mark Beckman. He is an expert on artificial intelligence. So a lot to talk about today. We'll start with the school shooting at Florida State University that happened on Thursday. It continued. This school shootings, to me, appear to be a near epidemic crisis in America. There is greater frequency than anybody really realizes. The impact on people is devastating. You send children away to school thinking that they're going to be in a safe environment, and you then get that horrible call explaining that your child has been killed. I can't even imagine. The fact of the matter is, I don't even want to contemplate it. It is so horrifically painful to think about what a parent goes through when they get that sort of a shocking call. It is sad beyond belief. But this guy was 20 years old. He was the son of a police officer in Gainesville. One of the weapons that he had was one that he took from his mother, who was the police officer. And I have been contemplating this issue for a long time, and I've got some thoughts that I want to share with you. But let's first see what President Trump had to say about the shooting.
Look, I'm a big advocate of the Second Amendment. I have been from the beginning. I protected it, and these things are terrible. But the gun doesn't do the shooting. The people do. It's, a phrase that's used probably too often. I will tell you that it's a shame. I'm just hearing about it now. I just hear about it. I know the area very well. I know the school very well. I know everything about it. It's Florida. And we'll have more to say about it later.
What do you mean when you say there will be more to say about it?
Only in terms of what happened. As far as legislation is concerned, this has been going on for a long time. I have an obligation to protect the Second Amendment. I ran on the Second Amendment, among many other things, and I will always protect the Second Amendment.
I think we're talking about the wrong things. Yes, the knee-jerk reaction when something like this happens is let's ban all guns. The fact of the matter is, you ban the guns, they'll take knives. You ban the knives, they'll bring a rock or a stone or some other means of killing someone. And I totally agree with President Trump. I mean, there are thousands of people who die every year in automobile accidents, 45,000 fatalities on American roads every year. A large percentage of those are caused by drunk drivers. I have not heard anyone yet say we should ban automobiles. To me, the analogy works. It is not the automobile that kills people, it's the drunk driver that kills the people. It is not the gun that kills people, it is the person who pulls the trigger that kills people. But I think that we make a horrible mistake. I'm sorry, Mr. President. I think you miss an opportunity. And this is the problem I have with politicians. Every chance they get to be a leader, be a healer, they appeal to their base. I think jumping straight to the Second Amendment is nothing less than appealing to President Trump's base, of which I'm a member. I am a part of his political base. I am totally loyal and devoted to President Trump, even if he has not been loyal and devoted to me. So, Mr. President, I don't want to hear from your lips ever again that you are loyal to a fault, because from personal knowledge, I know you are not. You are not loyal to a fault. In fact, I am told that loyalty is a one-way street for you. And that has certainly been my personal experience. So having said that, let me just hasten to add that I am still confirmedly devoted to President Trump. Is my loyalty to the man? No. My loyalty is to the office that he holds. And it is my considered opinion, unaffected by the slights that I have received from the president, that he is the best president of our lifetime. And what he is doing in this country today is nothing short of miraculous. And I cheer for him. I cheer for his success. But Mr. President, you missed an opportunity, a valuable opportunity, I believe, to do something impactful about school shootings. Let's see what Governor DeSantis had to say, and then I'll come back.
Casey and I stand in solidarity and are praying for the entire Florida State community. We're mourning the two individuals who lost their lives in this tragic attack, and we wish well those who are currently recovering in the hospital. This killer must and will be brought to justice to the fullest extent of the law. I want to also thank the law enforcement personnel who were on the scene, both for the university as well as for the city of Tallahassee. They ran towards the danger. They stopped this killer from inflicting more harm, and there is no question that they saved lives. We are all Seminoles today. We stand by to help in any way that we can. God bless you, and God bless Florida State University.
Another somewhat typical reaction from a politician. You thank law enforcement. I agree. You reiterate that they are going to be punished to the full extent of the law. I mean, do you even need to say that? I mean, who would think that they wouldn't be punished to the full extent of the law? But Governor DeSantis and President Trump and their predecessors and other politicians similarly situated automatically, knee-jerkly respond in the same way. Oh, we're going to defend the Second Amendment. We're going to prosecute to the fullest extent of the law. And thank you for law enforcement for so bravely putting yourself in between the shooter and the would-be victims. All true. All true. 100%. But they miss an opportunity. What opportunity could you possibly be talking about, John? The opportunity to intervene. The opportunity to get to the root cause and deal with it. Nobody's talking about it. Now, some people say, oh, it's a function of mental illness. Other people say that's a cop-out. You're letting them off the hook. I happen to agree. But I also see the argument that mental illness plays a role. Well, what does motivate someone to commit such a heinous act? Well, a survey that was conducted looked at 16 different factors. And number one was that the shooter, the assailant, wants to get back at those who have hurt them. I think George Herbert Walker Bush identified that many years ago when he said, we need a kinder, gentler nation. I mean, I'm astounded every day of the meanness that exists in the world. When I encounter friends of mine who say that they hate Donald Trump, I mean, I personally don't hate anybody. I literally, consciously try not to hate anyone. I'm human. There are people that I don't really care for. but I try not to take my dislike to the level of hate. Nelson Mandela said hating your enemy is like taking cyanide and hoping that your enemy will get sick. I get his point, and I agree. And I don't want to fill my heart with hate. But there are people that do hate. And there are people who are just inherently mean. And if there's any trait that I dislike in the human condition, it is meanness. And our country didn't used to be mean, I don't think. When I was a kid, there were mean people, but it wasn't an epidemic. Some days you just go out in the world and you feel like you're surrounded by meanness. The more educated we become, the more affluent we become, the more meanness I see in the world, accompanied by greed and selfishness. All you have to do is read the Bible to learn that those are not the ways to live your life. And I think that that's what's missing in our society today. And I'm not sure that the Supreme Court's decision on banning prayer in school isn't largely to blame. It seems like we've lost our moral compass in many ways. I just think if everybody in the world could agree to live by the Ten Commandments, we'd solve a lot of the world's problems. But I was a recipient of bullying when I was in high school. I was at the bottom of my class. I wasn't an athlete. I was skinny and gangly and uncoordinated. And I hated school and I acted out a lot. Somewhere along the line, I was able to get it back together, and I went to college and I started actually being treated as an adult rather than an adolescent, being told by teachers and administrators that I was to conform and behave in certain ways that I just didn't want to conform and behave in. Sorry. I was a disruptive child. But my disruption wasn't mean. It wasn't dishonest. It wasn't cheating. It was just, I just didn't like rules so much. I liked rules that had a purpose behind them. But I didn't like a rule that says you can't step over that crack in the concrete. I'll be damned, I'll show you. I'll step over that crack. Then I wonder where my kids get it from. I think my wife is wired that way a little bit too. But I just found school, elementary school, middle school, high school, to be incredibly controlling for control's sake. I had some teachers that were really laid back and really enjoyable and showed confidence in me as a kid, a young person. I remember them to this day, and I've made donations to the school in their honor. I remember other teachers that were just plain mean. And I remember some kids that were just plain mean. Mean for meanness' sake. They were unhappy, and they liked to vent their unhappiness towards others. And unfortunately, I became a lightning rod for some of those people. So what I'm trying to say is that I have empathy for kids that are mistreated. Usually, if someone will bother to care and dig a little deeper, they'll find out what's driving that young person to behave in the ways that are self-destructive in many ways. I mean, a lot of the crap I did in high school and trouble I got into, I brought on myself. I'm not blaming anybody else. I'm admitting I didn't like rules. I didn't like authoritarian teachers. I didn't like to be told to think a certain way if I didn't believe what I was being told. And so I would rebel. I was a little bit of a rebellious kid. I grew up. I learned lessons the hard way. And part of the lessons were the repercussions from being a disruptor and being someone that would not conform. I don't make any apology for it, really. I don't make any excuses for it. But I don't think the answer is to bully. I think the answer is to seek understanding. Maybe to lay a hand on that kid's shoulder. So these 16 things that people have identified as believed to motivate someone to act out. And let me hasten to add, I never, ever in my wildest dreams considered hurting someone else. I never considered retribution or getting even. It's just not the way I'm wired. And I was hurt. I can tell you right now, I was hurt on multiple occasions. I think it's part of the rite of passage. I think a lot of kids get hurt. Life is hard. If you don't learn how to be a survivor early on, you're not going to be a survivor as an adult. But I think we have to re-examine the way that we handle disruptive children. And that's all I'm saying. Why do kids get a firearm and go on a rampage? They want to get back at those who've hurt them. 86 of survey respondents identified that as the number one cause. Number two, other kids pick on them, make fun of them, and bully them. 85% of respondents identified that as the second reason. Now, I have a hard time separating number one and number two. I think you could combine those. Because to be bullied, picked on, or teased, or made fun of, or bullied seem all to be in the same cubicle to me. Third, and this is troubling, 63% of the survey respondents said that they believe that people that commit these kinds of heinous acts don't value human life. And that is a real concern of mine. That is a societal issue that we have to address. When I was young, the sanctity of life was like number one. It was number one in our society and in our culture. Do you know that today, in the far left liberals of this country, if you can identify who is in that group, over 50% felt that assassinating Donald Trump was a legitimate course of action leading up to his election. Now, I think that to me, just sends off all sorts of red flags and alarms. That large of a percent, not 50% of the country, but 50% of the liberal left, the leftists. Who would that be? Why, AOC comes to mind. Nancy Pelosi comes to mind. Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton. Oh, Barack Obama. I still want to know what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13th. I'm not going to let it go. I'm not going to stop talking about it. Donald Trump needs to know. The country needs to know. But 63% of the respondents on trying to identify what would motivate someone to go into a school and start shooting identify that they don't value human life. The fourth rung down the ladder is they have been the victims of physical abuse at home. The fifth cause, 57%, say that the shooter has mental problems. The sixth, it's easy to get a gun. Now that's one that we need to think about and talk about. I'm looking for solutions here. And that's what I want President Trump. And that's what I want Governor DeSantis. And that's what I want all of our political leaders and school principals and school boards and administrators. That's what I want them to think about and focus on. And no, I do not think that banning or restricting guns is an answer. It's certainly not the answer, but I don't even think it's an answer. But I'm going to come back to that in a second because there's more to talk about there. A seventh answer was they do not get along with their parents. Seriously? You don't get along with your parents, so you're just going to go out and shoot somebody? I would call that insanity. That is not rational. There is no objective explanation for that. They have witnessed physical abuse at home. Now there you go. That's one that I can relate to. Not personally, but I'm saying that's one that I can intellectually accept as a possible reason why someone would act out violently. Because if violence is being normalized in the home and you're an impressionable young person whose role models are engaging in violence, physical abuse, then that might track back to our, where was it? Our third cause of devaluing human life. There could be linkage there, is what I'm saying. The shooter drinks alcohol or uses drugs. No. I mean, what percentage of the people in America drink or use drugs? Forget drugs for a minute. I guess if you are a Charles Manson cult member and you're on hallucinogens and you are just way over the edge on drug use, maybe that could be a motivator, a cause. But telling me that drinking alcohol and smoking weed, or taking recreational drugs for that matter, can cause someone to act out in that kind of demonic violence? No, I'm not buying that. All right, let me run through the rest of them real quick. They do not have any good friends. I'm sorry, life can be hard. They see violence on television, movies, videos, and I think more significantly in computer and video games. Bingo has been called. Again, it's the normalization of violence that is the issue. When I was a kid, the villain always got the bullet. When I was a kid, the detective always got the bad guys. There was always hell to pay. But in video games, who's the villain? They're all villains. It's just violence for violence sake. Violence, number 12, violence is a way of life in their neighborhood. There we go again. We're normalizing violence. Other kids encourage them to do it? That seems like a real stretch to me. Their teachers don't care about them. Okay, I had teachers that didn't care about me. I actually had teachers that despised me, I felt like. And I know who you were. Okay. I had some bad teachers. They knew their subject matter. They just weren't nice. They just weren't compassionate. They didn't care about the kids, me. They just cared about getting to 3:30 and for the bell to ring. The kids are afraid of their own safety. I think there should be opportunities to provide for their safety. And this one, 18% of the people in the survey said, oh, the kids are just bored. Give me a break. A lot of this is just complete and utter lunacy. Okay, so some of their justifications and reasons, and I when I say justification, will you please allow me to not mean the use of that word? There is no justification. There is no freaking justification. Period. But what would bring someone to do these things? So here's what I'm saying. Stop talking about guns. Stop talking about, oh, we're going to be tough. We're going to prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. Of course you are. And what's the first thing that goes through our minds when we hear there is an active shooter? What is the first thing that you and I are guilty of thinking about? Neutralize the shooter. Kill him. Wrong answer. I'll tell you why. I don't have any sympathy for them. I don't think they have a right to live. That's not the point. The punishment. I think a lot of kids who go to a school with a gun intending to kill people fully expect to be killed. I don't see any way that someone who goes onto a school campus with a gun intending to inflict serious bodily harm on others could have any kind of expectation other than to die on that day. Ergo, they're crazy. They are pathologically, mentally ill. Now, some people say that claiming mental illness is just a cop-out in this conversation. That is, there is no excuse for being mentally ill. I disagree if we are going to solve the problem. If we continue to reflexively go back to talking about the Fifth Amendment or the Second Amendment, law and order, and how great the policemen are, we are not ever going to solve the problem. And that's the point I'm trying to drive home. I don't ever want to kill another active shooter. I want to inject them like we do a bear in the wild who's come into the city with a sleeping shot. I want to put the person to sleep. I want to handcuff them, drag them away, and put them in a confined, secure area and call in the shrinks and find out what possessed them. We don't have the answer. We've got 19 answers and 16 answers, and half of them are complete and utter lunacy. Oh, they drink alcohol and take drugs. BS. How many people drink alcohol and take drugs? We don't have a cadre of people going around and engaging in mass shootings. They don't get along with their parents. Well, you know, what kid does always get along with their parents? Did you ever fight with your parents? Usually, probably when they were disciplining you. I didn't always get along with my parents. But I loved my parents and they loved me. I don't care how bad it got. The thought that I didn't get along with my parents, the thought of going out and hurting somebody else because of that I'm sorry, that just doesn't compute. There is no linkage there. Intellectually, emotionally, happenstance, it just doesn't happen. What I'm saying is these 16 answers, half of them are complete and utter BS, and the other half deserve serious attention. And instead of going back to political speak, Second Amendment, law enforcement, prosecuting them. It's not getting us anywhere. We've got the Second Amendment. We're not going to change it. Just make up your mind right now. We are not going to suspend the Second Amendment in this country. And the NRA is going to prevent even little tiny bits of reform, which I disagree with. It should be hard for anyone to buy a gun under the age, I think, of 25. When the car rental companies will allow someone who's 18 or 20 to rent a car, then I will agree that they can buy a gun. Oh, but they can serve in the armed services. They can go into the Army. You're exactly right. And what happens when they go into the Army? They're taught. They are taught. They are taught self-discipline. They are taught gun safety. They are taught how to use a weapon, when to use a weapon, and when not to. Now, if we're going to educate every teenager in America on those things, then I would be in favor of people being able to buy guns when they achieve the age of majority, or how about at the age that they can consume alcohol? But these loopholes where kids can go to a gun show and somehow acquire an assault weapon or a gun capable of killing someone else has got to stop. And that's not desecrating the Second Amendment. That's just using the brain that God gave you. I think other legislation should be that anyone who possesses a weapon is required to secure the weapon so that it cannot be stolen, taken, or misused by a third person. I have guns. I love to hunt. It is a hobby of mine. I don't own an assault weapon. I've shot assault weapons. I've shot a machine gun. I've shot an AR-47. Is it an AR-47, Anthony? AK-47. I don't know assault weapons. I plead ignorance, and I plead it because, frankly, it is just of no interest to me. Going out and shooting an assault weapon or a machine gun, I mean, I can think of about 500 things I would prefer to do. I mean, I've done it. I get it. I mean, it's thrilling to do it once, but it's not something that I want to spend my weekend going to perfect or do. It's just not how I'm wired. But if other people want to do it, fine. You're of legal age and you want to possess and own that weapon and you want to use it as a hobby or for hunting or whatever you do with an assault weapon. What the hell do you do with an assault weapon other than protect your house? But I can tell you, I went to Chuck's Firearms in Atlanta 40 years ago and I said, I want to buy a pistol. And Chuck said, what for? I said, oh, just home protection. He said, well, I'll sell you one, but it's not the weapon of choice if you want to protect your home. No. You want to protect your home? Get a shotgun and put one under your bed, put another one behind your front door, another one behind your back door, and you don't even have to ever even think about, you don't even have to contemplate firing it. All you have to do is just go, chuk, chuk. It's the universal alarm. Get the hell off my property. There is not a human being alive that doesn't know what that sound is, and if they have any sense at all, they're going to run. But if they don't, hey, come on in. Face the consequences. I have no problem with self-defense. But do you really need an AK-47 to protect your home? I mean, the only time I can think of that you would need that is in the case of a major episode of civil unrest where the force coming onto your property is overwhelming, and so you need an adequate defense. Frankly, I don't lie awake at night fearing that. I mean, I can see how it could happen. I mean, I think the tensions in this country and around the world are at such a point that there are days that I think it wouldn't take much to devolve into a civil war. I mean, I thought that if Trump was assassinated in Butler, Pennsylvania, I would consider taking to the streets if I found out it was from some subversive group that was determined to overthrow our country. Damn right I would go. But I don't envision that. I don't predict that. I don't see that. But we all have responsibility to make sure that that doesn't happen. I was not a fond follower of George Herbert Walker Bush. For one thing, I suspect that he was in Dealey Plaza on November 22nd, 1963. He's the only human being that was alive on that day who professed that they didn't remember where they were. Yet he called the CIA supposedly with information relating to the assassination. There are pictures of someone in Dealey Plaza in front of the school book depository bearing a striking resemblance to George Bush the Elder. But he said we need a kinder, gentler nation. Those words ring so true to me. And so if we want to stop school shootings and this level of violence, it's not gun control. It's not law enforcement. It's finding that kid. Finding that kid who is suffering. And I have got to believe that the best brains in this country that work in the mental health field, that work in education, that work in law enforcement, could collaboratively profile kids at risk. And then we could intervene. But let's take it a step further. Let's talk about it. Let's make it part of the curricula in school. Let's talk about kids at risk and what they can do, where the safety nets are. Are you experiencing domestic violence at home? Here's what you can do. Here is a healthy choice that you can make. Are you abusing drugs and alcohol to a point that may cause you to have a psychotic event? Here's a safety net for you. Here's someone that you can go and talk to without fear of reprisal or repercussions. Are you the victim of bullying? I was bullied. I learned how to cope. I was lucky. And I also had a healthy amount of self-esteem. And I was self-aware. Other kids are not so fortunate. I developed my own coping mechanisms. You know what it was? I just went to work. That was my coping mechanism. From the age of 12, I had my own vending business. And by the age of 14, I was working at Burger Chef. That's McDonald's today for millennials who don't remember Burger Chef. I don't think it ever really caught on. And then I worked at the cotton mill, and then I worked in construction, and then I went to work at the bank my dad ran in Macon, Georgia. So I coped. And I also literally lived at the church. Because it was there that I found acceptance. It was there that I found and felt love. So there are options. But a lost child, and I was lucky. I had a mom and dad who took me to church. I would have never discovered church if they hadn't taken me there. If they hadn't required me to go to Sunday school every Sunday, an MYF Sunday night. And we went to Wednesday night supper at the church. And I went to the youth center on Friday night, Saturday morning, and Saturday night. I was lucky. I found refuge. I found a place where I genuinely felt loved and valued. But what if I hadn't? I don't know. I don't think I'm capable of doing what these people have done. I just don't think that's in any element of my DNA. The only time I would resort to violence is if someone legitimately threatened me or a family member where I felt like my life was in danger or my family was in danger. And then you're damn right, watch out. But fortunately, I've never been in that position, and I hope to never be in that position. But that does not stop me from sleeping with a shotgun in easy reach. But it is out of reach and out of sight and out of mind from my granddaughter when she comes to visit. And it will remain so. And other guns that I have that are not at the ready for self-protection are under lock and key behind a door that is locked. So, here's the point that I'm getting to. And then we'll move on. We've got to come up with different approaches. This absurd political speak, appealing to the base, an emotional response to get everybody fired up is not working. It hasn't worked. It won't work. Stop it. You're the President of the United States. Convene a blue ribbon commission of the best brains we've got in mental health, education, law enforcement. Have them meet once a month until we have a plan to stop school violence. America is consumed with this. It is not an epidemic, but it feels like an epidemic. And it could become an epidemic if we do not intervene. Other countries do not suffer from this sickness. So it is time that we get out of our denial. It is time that we get away from our emotional and political responses and engage in real, meaningful dialogue to get to the root cause, and then use legislation. I think every parent who owns a gun has to have a legal responsibility to secure that gun, preventing anyone from being able to steal it or take it without permission. And there is no permission if you're a kid, ever, unless you're going to the shooting range with your dad, or unless you're going to go hunting with your pop, your grandfather. Fine. I mean, life can still go on. We don't have to affect our quality of life, and we do not have to change or affect the Second Amendment to say, if you're a parent and you've got an assault weapon like Matthew Crooks' father had, that you have to keep it under lock and key. Jiminy Christmas. It's so obvious. The answers are so clear to me. Yet we stayed mired and wallow in this political speak that only encourages the next shooter. Really go after bullying. Really provide safety nets for children that are bullied. I had a teacher that bullied me in front of the whole class. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was humiliating. I choked up. One of my friends, unbeknownst to me, went to the principal of the school and reported the infraction. The principal called me into his office and asked me if what had been reported to him happened. And I said, yeah, I wasn't prepared, and the teacher was fed up and probably lost his cool. Okay. It's life. Things happen. The principal put his hand on my shoulder. He said, it'll never happen again. Dr. Joe Hill. I love that man. I loved him, and I still do. If you're in Macon, Georgia, and you went to Stratford Academy, you know exactly who I'm talking about. He had such a good nature about him. He was overweight, and the kids called him Dr. Fat Daddy, and he loved it. He didn't shun it. He didn't get mad. He embraced it. He would refer to himself that way. I loved that man. They called me the mayor of afternoon study hall because I was there virtually every day for something that I had done or failed to do. Dr. Fat Daddy called me to his office on another occasion and said, John, I'm not worried about you. He said, you could sell ice to Eskimos. Life is going to work for you. Those words have stuck with me to this day. 55, 60 years later. That's what we need. That's what kids need. They don't need condemnation. They don't need punishment. They don't need, well, they do need discipline. Damn right they do. But they need a healthy, hefty potion of understanding, compassion, and caring. Dr. Hill cared about me. I know he did. And it propelled me through life. I wish he was here so I can thank him. And there were others too. Mrs. Happ taught me Georgia history. She loved me. I loved her. Mr. Fields taught me algebra. He always had my back. That's what kids need. They need a safety net. They need somebody to care. We can intervene. Isn't it worth a try? Isn't it worth trying to stop this madness? Well, I hope our politicians will wake up. I will continue to do my part to try and awaken them. But I can tell you what we're doing right now is failing. Our leaders get a big fat F. They get a failing grade because they're not dealing with the problem. They're only allowing it to continue. And that is the truth as I believe it. Here's some other truth for you. The senator from Maryland was determined to meet Kilmer Abrego Garcia. He was illegally in the United States. He'd been arrested 6 times. 2 courts found conclusively that he was a member of MS-13. And he was mistakenly, we are told, deported to El Salvador. Prompting not only a court, but including the Supreme Court to order the Trump administration to return him to the United States for due process. Okay. So we had the president of El Salvador in the Oval Office the other day. He and Trump basically sat there, and Trump said, I can't return him to the United States. I don't have the legal authority to return him from El Salvador. And the president of El Salvador said, I don't have the legal authority to import a convicted felon or a felon into the United States. Maybe both are true. But you're setting up a constitutional crisis when it could be avoided. To me, the easy answer would be to say, should he have been deported? No one denies that it was a mistake that occurred somewhere, somehow, to deport him to El Salvador and put him in that horrible prison. Is it a horrible prison, or is it a prison for horrible people? It's kind of a rhetorical question, isn't it? CCOT, they call it. One of the most secure prisons, overrun by some of the deadliest, most evil to walk the earth. It's hard to engender any sympathy for the people that are there or the people that are sent there. They're rapists, they're robbers, they're murderers. They've committed crimes against humanity that justify their punishment. Does Kilmer Abrego Garcia justify deportation and being locked up in CCOT? I'm conflicted. We're a country of laws. A court, which I disagree with, I think, has ruled that the Garcia be returned to the United States, and the Supreme Court has sided with the lower court. I think the President of the United States and the President of El Salvador could agree that he needs to be returned to the United States, whereupon he should receive his due process hearing. He's got a wife in the United States. I don't believe in indiscriminately deporting people without some measure of due process. That does not mean a trial. I don't even think it means an indictment. A, they're illegal. B, they've been arrested. C, they've been accused of a heinous act, and it's not disputed. Send them back. You're not an American citizen. You are not protected under the Bill of Rights. You're here illegally. I'm sorry. Send them back. What the country of origin does with those individuals, not our problem, not our concern. Now, we can make it our concern. President Carter was very active on the subject of human rights. And I would like to see all countries in the world afford due process and the premise of innocent until proven guilty. But there are too many people in the world. There are too many sovereign countries in the world. We cannot be the policemen of the world. Nobody has anointed us as the governing world body. And I don't even know that would be a good thing. There are checks and balances in the way the world operates. I think that's pretty good. But human rights is certainly a cause that we can take up with any country that we choose to. But we can't micromanage the judicial process of every country in the world, nor should we try. And so if the people that have come here illegally and are sent back to their country of origin are mistreated, it's between them and their government. It is not our job on a case-by-case basis to sort it out. But in the case of Garcia, if a mistake was made, bring him back, take him through the process, find that he committed felonies in the United States of America and that he was here illegally, and then send him back. Well, you say that's a waste of time. Your freedom, my freedom depends on it. What doesn't work for Garcia today may not work for us tomorrow. And so the process itself is worth protecting. They may not be entitled to the Bill of Rights, but they should be entitled to some modicum of due process. Certainly someone who is innocent of any of the crimes of which they are being accused should not be banished and sent to CCOT for the rest of their days of their lives. If they do, we are culpable. Bring him back, send him through the process, and then send him back. Or go down there and do it. Go down there and present the evidence. I don't know. But stubbornly saying that we're not going to bring him back when the Supreme Court has ordered you to do it is not a smart decision. It sets up a constitutional crisis. Play the game. Follow the rules. Honor the Constitution. I don't think that we can criticize the Democrats for short-circuiting the system, and then we short-circuit the system and justify it because we know the guy is a felon. Okay, true, the guy is a felon. But there is a process. We didn't follow the process. He was sent back without the process. So why create a constitutional crisis when you can solve it so easily? Bring him back, put him through the process, send him back. I know, it sounds stupid. Why would we go to that trouble? We would go to that trouble because we are a nation of laws. It's that simple. Whew. Have we got some clips on that? Yeah. Let's go look at the senator from Maryland.
Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen with the photo evidence that he met with accused gang member Garcia in El Salvador yesterday. He said that meeting was the main goal of his trip there. Homeland Security Advisor Stephen Miller called out Garcia's defenders.
You have the entire machinery of the Democrat Party using all of its power not to fight for lower costs, as President Trump is, or better trade deals, as President Trump is, or lower taxes, as President Trump is, but to fight to bring this illegal alien with all those horrific crimes and allegations and history against him back to the United States, where he can do what? He can commit additional acts that threaten the safety of the American people. This is the biggest, sharpest contrast you will ever see between the priorities of President Trump and the priorities of the Democrat Party.
Republican Senator Josh Hawley with this.
The Democrat Party has officially hit moral rock bottom. They are so in love with criminal illegals that they would like to go and personally escort them into the country one at a time, which I guess I slightly prefer to Joe Biden's version of this, which was to allow them in 10,000 a day at a time. But the truth is, the whole thing is absurd.
The White House emphasized the contrast between the parties on this issue. It posted a picture of Van Hollen's meeting alongside a photo of President Trump embracing Patty Morin. Her daughter Rachel was murdered by an illegal immigrant. The caption, "We are not the same."
Yeah, we even had this gang member from Venezuela, one of the ones you sent. And we interviewed him just to get some information, etc. from them. And he said, "Oh, well, I got arrested 6 times. But they released me the 6 times, so I should be released again." And then he said, "Well, what was the last thing you do?" And he said, "Well, I shot a cop in the leg, but I didn't kill him. I just shot him in the leg." And we're like, this guy was arrested 6 times here in the United States, 6 times. He was released 6 times, and in the he was released 5 times, and the last time he was sent to El Salvador, right? So he's not getting released. But the last time he shot a cop, actually, and he shot him in the leg. So these are, like you said, there's something broken.
It's the liberal establishment, but they're not running things anymore in this country, and we're run by, and I don't say conservative, I don't say anything, we're run by people with great common sense.
Yeah, common sense.
Because it's all common sense. It's not liberal conservative, it's common sense.
All right, it's common sense. I agree. And the case that the president of El Salvador laid out there is very convincing to me. It's not a question of whether he should have been deported. It is a question of whether he was deported in a correct manner. That's the issue. So I don't know how you fix it, but don't set up a constitutional crisis when it can be avoided. That's my message. And don't chip away at the foundation of our laws, because you're right. I mean, in this country, you could have someone shoot another person. There could be 100 witnesses. The person could be dead. You have the murder weapon, and you have a confession from the shooter. We don't throw him in jail immediately. Well, we do. We detain him, but we don't sentence him until he has a trial. Now, I'm not saying that this bum, and that's what he is, a thug, deserves a trial. I'm not saying he deserves any sympathy. But what I'm saying is that the rule of law in this country must be upheld. And if there is to be some sort of a hearing, some sort of a process that we go through before we deport someone and have them placed at CCOT, which we don't ordain, but we know that's the outcome, it should be followed. Because who's next? And then what happens when they are a U.S. citizen? And we've condition people to the notion that if you commit a crime, you just go straight to jail. You don't have a trial. You don't have a defense. You don't have protections under the Bill of Rights. I'm not saying that that is the result, but I am saying that there's a right way and a wrong way. It wasn't done the right way. Let's fix it. Just fix it. Why are we wallowing in this? Why are we worrying about it? Just fix the process. Bring him back, put him through the process, send him back. Or I would be okay in this case with sending people from the United States to El Salvador and conduct the hearing there. Let him mount a defense and let the chips fall where they may. I would suspect that he would be found, that his deportation would be upheld, and then we move on and talk about things we really need to talk about, like how we're going to round up the rest of the gang members that are terrorizing our nation. Tariffs continue to be in the news. Last week I said President Trump is in the process of remaking the U.S. economy, and I believe that he is. The first step in the process is to establish tariffs, reciprocal tariffs, where countries are getting an unfair advantage in trading with the United States. Help me understand why we should do that. Now, if we wanted to do it for members of the EU after World War II, when we were helping them rebuild, I'm all in. But 75 years later, when they've got a GDP that rivals ours and a population that is greater than ours in the aggregate, what possible intellectual argument can you make justifying tariffs that are unfair to the United States? I can't think of any. And it doesn't get us anything. All we do is create a class of people who expect and demand more. President Trump has got a big, Teddy Roosevelt said, speak softly but carry a big stick. President Trump's got a huge stick. We help provide for their defense. We don't talk about it. I don't know why we're not talking about it. But we talk about that, but not in the context of tariffs. But mind you, it is present. If not in the discussion, everybody knows it. They don't, like President Trump told Zelensky, you don't have the cards. You don't have the cards. You want us to protect you from Putin? You can't keep treating us badly and shabbily on trade. Germany, if you're going to sell us your cars, your Mercedes and your BMWs, we're no longer going to tariff you at 2.5% while you tariff our American-made cars at 10%. Help me understand how you rationalize or justify that. You dumbass Democrats that talk about how Trump is being so mean and vindictive. How is it mean and vindictive? Now, he is being punitive towards China, but that's a different topic. You're damn right he is being punitive to China, because what do? They steal our intellectual property. They reverse engineer our technology, then sell it back to us at a lower cost, and that hurts American manufacturers. Why? Because Microsoft, Intel, IBM, pick your brand, Dell, had to pay for the research and development that goes into those products. And that cost a ton of money. It doesn't cost much to reverse engineer it and figure out how they did it, and then duplicate it and sell it back to American consumers for less money. That's just plain wrong. Yet, weak presidents before us have allowed it to go on and on and on and on. I've read that 90% of our pharmaceuticals are made in China. That is scary. They've got us by the proverbial you know what. But it can change overnight. It can change in a nanosecond. And Johnson & Johnson has announced that they're investing $50 billion in new tools, plants, and equipment in the United States. And President Trump, as part of this remaking of our economy, has had over $4.5 trillion committed. And he's just getting going. I'm telling you, the golden age is at our doorsteps. Be patient. The market can only see 24 hours in advance. They can't see ahead of this month's earnings report and this month's financial report. They don't have the ability to look 90, 120, 6 months, a year down the road. I think that's stupid. I don't know how we've gotten there. But you don't have to go along with that. So the markets need to calm down. They need to stabilize. They need to let President Trump and Scott Bessent do their thing. They've got 75 of the world countries coming to Washington to negotiate trade. They know they've been taking advantage of us. They're not in denial. Give them the opportunity to do their thing, to set it right, and then let it play out. The money that is going to flow into our United States Treasury is going to be mind-boggling. President Trump has already said he's going to eliminate the income tax for earners who get less than $150,000 a year. He's talking about not taxing Social Security. I would appreciate that. No tax on tips. We don't tax tips anyway. You know that those people don't turn in their tip money on their on their W-2. They don't get a W-2, and they don't report it on their annual tax return. I mean, come on. That's a freebie. There's no cost in that. What else are we not going to tax? We're not going to tax overtime. I love it. I love it. So we're going to return jobs to America. We're going to reduce the tax burden on Americans. We're going to eliminate fraud, waste, and abuse. All of these things make common sense, yet the Democrats have the gall to criticize President Trump over it and criticize Elon Musk. That furor seems to have been dying down. Why? Because they're losing. They're doing what they've done that caused them to lose control of the Senate, the House, and the White House. Please keep doing what you're doing. You are speeding your demise. We are going to become, I think, a one-party nation, and I don't think it should be Republican, Democrat, or independent, or libertarian. How about just the American Party? How about we all come together and say, what's good for America? Let that be our litmus test. And somehow we've got to tame the special interests, and we got to get rid of permanent Washington, which is a big part of the problem, because they make regulations for the sake of making regulations. And it stifles creativity, it stifles productivity, and it puts a constraint on our GDP and jobs and innovation. That's got to be reined in, and President Trump is in the process of doing that. Just look at what DOGE is doing. They shut down USAID. They are getting rid of regulations by the truckload. 450 executive orders, and we're not even 3 months into the new administration. Almost. Not there yet. But we're getting there. Italy visited the U.S. on Thursday. India and South Korea are coming next week. They're going after the world's largest economies first, and then they'll work their way down the food chain. Even Vietnam has said, you're right, no more tariffs. We're at parity. That's what we need. And if a country is disadvantaged and we want to give them a hand up, then by all means, let's do so. And this talk about tariffs are going to cause inflation, There is some risk, but I'm not buying it, because in this country, competition rules. And if a tariff causes a product made in China more expensive, then United States companies will just produce a product that costs less. Simple. And it works right into President Trump's plan. I love it. Let the good times roll. All right, well, let's get to our guest. Thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts and opinions today. Some of you are going to disagree with what I've had to say. It's okay. I like debate, not for the sake of debate, because I want to see us get it right. These things deserve our attention. We need to get them right. Now on to our first guest. Young men are under assault in America today. It's no longer cool to be a dude. At least that's what the mainstream media and certain leftists would tell you. Well, I've got a young man here, Braden Sorbo, who would differ with that. He's actually written a book called Embrace Masculinity, Lifting Men Up in a World That Pushes Them Down. Why are people trying to put down dudes these days, Braden?
It's ironically a pretty simple answer. It's because men pose a threat to whoever's in charge. And so it's not a matter of if, a man is going to lead. The second chapter of the book is called The War Between the Patriarchies. And it states that it's not a matter of if a man's going to lead. It's a matter of whether or not the man in charge is going to be good or bad. And we've seen it throughout the entire course of history, men being good leaders and bad leaders. And when a man is a good leader, society thrives. When good men get together, countries are built, communities are established, and families are created. So we have this current leadership situation where the people in charge, and this isn't just specifically limited to government, this is in relation to the media, Hollywood, the news, mainstream media, as well as even the music industries and the type of content that is constantly being shoved down people's throats, walking through anywhere their TV is. And so good men are a threat to a bad ruler. So the bad rulers will do one of three things. They will, one, try to harness the strength of men. We saw that during the time of the Exodus with the Pharaoh and the Israelites, forcing slavery upon them, harnessing their power. And then the next stage of that was the suppression of it, where they will essentially try to put in restrictions as to prevent a revolt or an uprising. And we're seeing that today with bread and circuses, just like the Romans did. How we have the football, basketball, all of these sports seasons that keep people complacent and distracted. And finally, if neither of those options work, the bad leaders will take to killing. They will take to eliminating. And what we have today in America is that final stage. And I know a lot of people are hearing that going, killing? No one's getting executed on the street for being a man. It's like, no, but there is a spiritual killing right now happening in this world with pornography. And what happens is they make pornography mainstream and normal. And what it does is it kills your spirit and drive. And so you are now complacent, subjugated, and spiritually dead, which is a combination of all three. And that is the stage that we're at in America today. And that is why men have become so weak. It's because they've been coerced and forced into it.
So you're a young guy. I believe you were homeschooled. Is that correct?
It is, yes.
So what did you do? And I've always wondered, I think that part of homeschooling is very positive from the standpoint that you're almost assured of a good education. I mean, my suspicion, without evidence, is that if you've got a mom or a dad who's willing to take that responsibility on, they're really going to put forth their best effort for their own child to make sure that they get a good education. But I wonder if the downside is that you are deprived of the social aspects of going to school, much of which, for me as a kid, was not necessarily positive. I was a skinny, gangly, uncoordinated kid that wore glasses and braces and carried a briefcase to school. I was not the most popular kid on the campus, I can tell you. Of course, things have changed since I've matured.
Of course.
But it's not all good, but I do think that it is a good precursor to life because I learned some valuable coping skills, and I've learned how to take care of myself. So what you understand what I'm getting at here? How did your experience from being homeschooled compare, and how did you develop the social skills, and where did you find that outlet?
Well, I was homeschooled starting in the beginning of third grade, so I had a little bit of a social kind of experimentation in the public school system, and I was on track to become one of the popular kids. I was one of the top athletes in my little elementary school, and I had
There
all my
you go.
friends and all this stuff, and so I have always been an extrovert. So making friends and being social pretty much comes second nature to me. Now, when it came to becoming homeschooled, there was a slight dip in my social life, but overall, I had youth group that I attended and I made friends there. And so those friends from those public schools at the youth group I went to would invite me places. And so I constantly had a circle of people that I was around. So I never necessarily experienced the isolation that a lot of people consider homeschoolers to be. And so I really fail to see the downsides of homeschooling. I mean, that is ironically the way that the school system was originally designed by God. Obviously, the parents were tasked with raising their kids. That's what Proverbs says: teach a kid the way that he will go, and he will not depart from it all his life. And so when we gave the schools the power and the influence and the control, it destroyed families.
I
Because
never
it took
gave
them
it to
apart.
them. I think they just flat out took it.
Yes.
It's authoritarian fascism, if you ask me. And I was never really that fond of many of my teachers. I don't know. When I think back on it, I would say maybe half and half. But the ones I didn't like were the ones that do this because I tell you to do it, and not because it's going to be in your best interest or good for you necessarily. But then there were another group of teachers who I felt like actually saw my worth and believed in me. And I remember those teachers and celebrate them to this day. And I have actually proactively reached out to them and thanked them for believing in me when a lot of other people did not. I say thank God for Brad, because otherwise I would have been dead last in my high school class. But somewhere along the line, I turned on. In college, I got to take the stuff I loved. They didn't tell you what to do or where to go or when to do it. And then I was able to somehow claw my way into law school, where I graduated in the top third of my class. So I do give a lot of the credit for that to the schooling that I got and those teachers who did see my future and believe in me. And I'm eternally grateful for that. But what about sports? How did you... what outlet did you find I heard you say that you were a good athlete early on. You're a tough kid, took care of himself. How did you supplement that when you were homeschooled?
So I played a lot of sports when I was a kid. I played basketball, football, baseball, soccer, lacrosse, even tried tennis and golf for a little bit. I will say the one thing that I regret when I became homeschooled was I lost my aggressive edge, because I didn't feel the need to compete anymore. When I was in public school, I needed to compete for attention, for acclimates, for whatever. When I became homeschooled, I didn't necessarily feel that drive. And so my sports definitely reflected that. I wasn't as good of an athlete throughout them, but basically I played until I broke my hand in football, which was my freshman year of high school. And I had a coach who was then, like a year or two later, arrested for child abuse. So after dealing with him breaking my hand, I decided that football wasn't necessarily my thing. I stuck to basketball, and then I got into weightlifting, and I sort of gave it all up. I went into powerlifting for a year. I'm 6'5". I got up to 260 pounds. Deadlifted over 500, squatted over 400, benched 315. Like, it was super fun. Love that. And I still do bodybuilding to this day because I believe in functional athletics. And so I've always been fit, or at least tried to be athletic. And it's reflected itself in great ways just in every facet of my life. I mean, there is something so scientifically provable, but also crucial to a person's mental health when it comes to their physical health. There are direct correlations. So when you are physically strong and healthy, you are also mentally stronger.
I totally agree with you. And I as an adult, I changed. I ran. I lifted weights. I gone to the gym for 30 years, in case you can't tell. And I was an avid golfer, and then now play a lot of tennis. And I do think that is important to one's self-esteem. When I'm bird hunting with the guy that owns the farm, and he's out of breath and is asking me how can I walk 10 miles and not get out of breath, it is reinforcing. It's flattering. But I guess the point of all this is, when I was younger, a little younger than you, and I was in high school and college, the jocks got the girls, man. And they were the cool kids. And if you could read, write, and do arithmetic, then you were a superstar. And those people were celebrated. Is that the case today in schools, or is it something different?
I really wouldn't be able to give you a specific because I'm not in schools anymore, but I would say a lot of it has to do with political or social clout. I mean, a lot of people chase that online fame more than they chase anything else. And so guys will get healthy, they'll get in shape, but they care more about having a six-pack to show it off on social media to try to get a girl than they do about actually using it functionally. And I'm not going to hate on the guys who are taking care of themselves. I will say that, going and sleeping around is an idiotic move and not something that you should be doing. You're a weak man if that's your mentality. But society has changed in the sense that I would argue when you were a kid, when you were in high school, college, you, or guys as a whole, had to try to get laid. Whereas today, we have to try not to get laid. I mean, it's the most absurd thing ever. I have a shirt that says repeal the 19th Amendment, and girls will hit on me when I wear it. I have a shirt that says the future is patriarchy, and I have people approaching me like, hell yeah, man. Like, I have to try to avoid social confrontations, which is funny because obviously online it's the polar opposite. You have all these crazy leftists who are just yelling in the comment sections, thinking that they're the majority, when in reality they're slowly becoming a minority, at least among the social groups. Because when you get down to brass tacks, no woman wants a liberal man. They all want conservative men because they'll date a liberal man. They'll realize that he is more of a woman than they are. And they decide, well, that's not what I'm in this relationship for. And so they'll leave. And so you get these women complaining online that there's no good men, or at least no good liberal men. And all the attractive guys are conservative. It's like, yeah, your natural inclination is to go to someone who's strong, who's going to be able to protect and provide for you. And you have the conservative men who are going, I just want to get a nice woman who doesn't, just make herself available to every single person on the whole planet online. And we have this divide happening in America today, which is the biggest it's ever been in terms of the political spectrum. You have more women who voted blue this last election than ever before, and more men who voted red this last election than ever before. And so this divide is only going to keep growing until something has to give. And my hope is that the young men who read this book at sorbostudios.com, shameless plug, the young men who read Embrace Masculinity, stick their heels in, dig in, and continue to fight on this side, because eventually the tide will shift and come back towards the way of tradition, which is what I'm aiming for and the whole reason why we're here today.
Well, it's kind of a conundrum to me, really, because you see that there clearly is a movement from somewhere to, I don't know what the term is, to put down, to lessen the aura of a masculine guy. But then you have Tim Walz, when he runs for vice president, you would think that would be his position, and that would be the camp we would find him in. Yet he's trying to portray himself as an auto mechanic and somebody that can shoot birds but can't load the shotgun. I mean, it's kind of crazy to me, really. I mean, why are we trying to in some way diminish the role of a masculine male in our society? I mean, and also, really, at the end of the day, isn't it an exercise in futility? Because I think that you're not really tinkering with man or woman, you're tinkering with God's natural order. I mean, guys were made the way they are because they attract females who want to procreate, and they want a husband that can fend for the family and provide for them and also look after them. I mean, am I missing something here? Or, you're young, I'm old, and I don't get it. I just frankly don't get it.
No, you're not missing anything. It's the pussification of America. It goes back to what I mentioned at the beginning of our talk, where men are being controlled, men are being manipulated, and men are being suppressed. And what happens is when these men become suppressed, it makes the women easily manipulated. It makes them easily controlled, which is why the biggest issue for young women voters in America this past election, 2024, was abortion. The biggest issues for men, the economy, immigration, the stock market, gas, rent prices, groceries.
Okay, so where do you think this movement is coming from? Who are the people that are trying to diminish the role of a masculine male in our society? But more importantly to me is, what do they hope to achieve from that?
Well, they hope to achieve the eradication. They hate. So basically, we can sit here and go, God created a divine order in the universe that is unchangeable, and there's nothing we can do about it. That's how God made it. We're not God. We can't do anything to change it, quote unquote.
Well, I think you just summarized my perspective. Do you
Yes.
agree with that?
Yes, without a doubt. There is a universe. There is a universal order installed from the very beginning. Men were meant to lead a family. Women were meant to submit and respect the man's authority. That does not make women less than or less valuable than. It means that there is order. Jesus is not less than God. He's not less valuable than God, and he's still submitted to the will of the Father. That's simply how it works. So the reason why this is currently happening in America is because the people in charge, and I mean everywhere. I'm not talking just the president or just Congress or just the House or just
Sure.
Hollywood. I'm talking all of the people collectively who run it hate Christ. They hate Christ and his children, Christians. Alvin Goldstein is the father of hardcore pornography in America today. He in the 70s or 80s is when he started to mainstream and normalize this world in which we live, because everything technically has devolved since that time. And so Alvin Goldstein is quoted as saying, "We, the people in the porn business, hate Christ and his children. We want to desecrate his daughters, and this is why we do this business." So there is a very, very tactful reason why these people are doing it. It's because they hate Christ and what he stands for. They don't want this order in the universe. They want to destroy it. They want to upend it, and they want to be in charge. They want to make themselves God, and so they need to remove God as he currently sits. And so this goes back all the way to the original waves of feminism. The first rules that were passed once the 19th Amendment was in place were the rules that instigated the abortion acts with Margaret Sanger, eventually up to Planned Parenthood in 1972 with Roe v. Wade, and credit score, among other things. And so what has happened is we have essentially controlled and manipulated an entire gender into thinking that the most important thing for them to do is be able to kill the baby inside their stomach, which is an awful thing for anybody to do. I was just having a discussion with someone online who said, "What about rape and incest?" And I said, "You mean less than 0.5% of all abortions? It's terrible. Rape and incest is wrong. And we should punish the rapist, not the infant." And so this mental gymnastics that we are now reaping the fruit of, unfortunately, that was sown, the problem is my generation didn't even sow it. I get to reap the fruits, which are very rotten, by the way, of previous generations who don't have to worry about the consequences of their actions, because I am now dealing with the consequences of their actions. And plenty of young men my age feel the same way, which is why we are so pissed off at the current state of the world.
Okay, you have to stop a second and break that down for me. I'm not following you. Where are you coming from? You're saying my generation did something that is adversely affecting you now?
I'm saying that the previous generations before us have slowly, and this is not any specific person, but have slowly been foregoing certain rights or certain things that they were once taken for granted. And now my generation, unfortunately, is reaping the benefits or the lack thereof. So, for example, in 1959, if you graduated from college, you were basically guaranteed a job with a salary that paid at minimum around $11,000 a year. If you take inflation into account, $11,000 in 1959 is worth like $120,000 today. Today, 2025, a college graduate, or I think 2024 was when the study was done, a college graduate is not guaranteed, but they could get a job with $60,000 to $80,000 as a salary starting. That's at least a $40,000 discrepancy, not accounting for inflation when it comes to the housing market for rent or for groceries or gas or cars so we are living in a world now where everything is more expensive. My dad was fourth of 5 kids, so 7 people in his household. They lived in a small little household in Minnesota, Mound, a town of like 7,000 people. and they survived off of a 7th and 8th grade math and biology teacher's salary. You can't do that today.
How many of your dad and his siblings went to college?
So my dad went and double majored marketing and advertising, and then he dropped out at I think his junior year to go pursue acting, which worked out well for him. His older brother was one of the top accountants in the country before he retired a couple years ago. So he went to school. They all went to college in some degree, but that was when college was useful. I mean, that's why you have so many people foregoing college. There are more women going to college than there are men, and those women are accumulating insane amounts of debt. Most men are actually opting to go to a trade school because trades are dying out. In Florida, we have 300,000 different trade workers who will be retiring in the next couple years. That's a big, big gap because we need people to replace them, and we're not getting those numbers, at least yet. It's slowly making a comeback because people are realizing that college today doesn't actually benefit. I mean, I was working on a movie with this girl, and she told me that she was in college. I said, "Oh, what are you studying?" She goes, "Gender." And I said, "Oh, okay. Man, woman, male, female. Congratulations, you just passed. Now give me $80,000.
Yeah, I think we used to call that biology. I get where you're coming from. I don't know about your statistics on the income. I think there might be also that old rule of supply and demand coming into play a little bit. I mean, my dad did not go to college. He grew up on a farm. He worked his butt off and ended up being president of a bank. But people that did go to college were going to make a lot of money than he did starting out. And we've educated or availed a college education to virtually every living human being. If they can pass a standardized test, they can go to college. So I don't know if that's a part of it or not, but you make very valuable points. And, Braden, I really like hanging out with young people, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. And you are wise beyond your years, 23 years old. You've written a book. I'm still waiting to write my first one. It's called Embrace Masculinity, Lifting Men Up in a World That Pushes Them Down. Braden's also an actor. He has had roles in about 10 movies that I count. And I think we're going to be hearing a lot more from you in the future. And I hope you'll come over here to West Palm Beach and let's grab lunch or a cup of coffee or, I don't know, maybe an adult beverage. And you can show me how you work your magic on all these ladies.
That sounds good to me.
Thank you so much for coming on, Braden, and best of wishes. Where do we find your book, and where can we keep track of you?
So people can go to bradensorbo.com, and that there is a shop tab if they want to get the book from there, but that will have my about section and all of my other social links. Online, it's just Braden Sorbo.
And when's the book come out?
The book is officially available for pre-sale right now, and in the next couple weeks, mid to late April, is when all ordered copies for pre-sale will be shipping out, and everything else will be following suit.
And where do you buy the book?
Buy the book at sorbostudios.com.
There you go. All right. Well, congratulations to you on your first book, one of many to come. And are you still pursuing your acting career?
I am. I'm actually working on a new script right now. I'm very excited to hopefully turn into a movie.
Well, good. Well, I look forward to getting to know you better and tracking your progress into the future. And based on our brief time together, I think this generation is going to turn out just fine.
We can only hope.
Have a great rest of your weekend, Braden.
Thanks, you too.
The United States government is on the verge of dismantling the Department of Education and returning it to the states. Education is ever present in the news and on the lips of every parent with school-age children. Our guest today is Sam Sorbo. She is the author of Parents' Guide to Homeschool, Making Education Easy and Fun. Sam, that's a compelling topic. I never felt like my education was easy, and I probably wouldn't have described it as fun. Then again, I wasn't a very good student in those days. I've somehow figured out how to get my act together by the time I got to college, but how do you make it fun, and why are you an advocate for homeschooling?
Well, first, let me ask you, did you study radio broadcasting or media in college?
I did, actually, and that was public speaking, and those were courses that I gravitated towards.
Right. And so how did your elementary and high school education feed into those courses?
Oh, it was reading, reading, writing, and arithmetic,
Right.
and a pretty long ruler that my teacher seemed to favor me with.
Yeah. So basically, you spent 13 years, K through 12, studying things that didn't interest you, which is why you thought it
Bingo.
was hard and not very interesting, right? Boring.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're getting wrong these days. And we've been getting it wrong for a very long time. They got it wrong for me. They got it wrong for most of my peers. The school paradigm where you sit in a classroom and get lectured to and regurgitate for an exam suits maybe I think I'm being generous here, maybe 10% of the population, but the other 90% are underserved in the schools. They are actually abused by the school system because they don't fit in. And in fact, I heard on Joe Rogan, he was talking with, I think it was Brett Weinstein, another powerhouse brainiac person, right? And they were talking about how they were both divergent. What we call divergent is somebody who doesn't quite fit the norm. So Joe Rogan had ADHD. I think Brett Weinstein complained that he was also somehow ADHD or something, and he wasn't really fitting in the mold.
I
And
had
so,
ADHD and hyperactivity along with it. But
which
you know
is
what? It's not all bad because I got more energy now than any one of my 72-year-old friends.
right. So this is my point, is that you were labeled as problematic because you didn't fit into their box. But unfortunately for us, that's not a problem. It's a problem for the school administrators and for the teachers. But for life, it's actually a superpower. And so Rogan and Weinstein were talking about this, and Weinstein said, actually, we were kind of blessed because when you're divergent in that manner, you figure out pretty early on what they're doing in the classroom doesn't serve you. And it's silly. Like you rise above it. You're like done with it. And you move on and out, and you start to do the things that actually interest you, despite them telling you, no, sit down with the ruler, right? And do the things that I tell you to do. And so we've been doing this to our kids for a very long time. So you started with, we're disbanding the Department of Education. Unfortunately, I don't see that as doing anything really to help children in schools. And in fact, we're talking a lot these days about school choice, which we have already. But for some reason, they're trying to sell us on this idea that we don't have school choice. But if the government funds it, we will have more choice, which you and I both know is a lie from the pit of hell. If the government funds it, you will get less choice. It might appear as if you have more choice, up front, but in the long run, you will have less choice, which is what we're seeing in our great state of Florida. They implemented the PrEP Act, and the Step Up is one of the programs, and you can apply as a homeschooler or as a person who doesn't want your child in whatever this public school is, and you can get $7,000 or $8,000 from the government. And you can think that there are no strings attached, but there are always strings attached. And so the first year, they just gave out the money. But the second year, in order to qualify, you had to do some testing. And I will tell you that eventually, if not, sooner rather than later, the testing will be online. You won't be able to access it. You won't be able to see the questions that they're asking your children. And those are strings that are attached. And there is massive data mining for these kids. And it's actually a very dangerous thing. The other thing is, if you're a homeschooler and you take the money, you're not a homeschooler anymore. You no longer qualify as a homeschooler. You are now under the jurisdiction of the state, which is the reason that you left the school in the first place, is you didn't like what the state was doing to our so-called education.
Well, now you have 3 children. We had the privilege of speaking with Braden on the program, and what a fine young man that you have raised with some really strong foundational values that came out through the course of our conversation. So I compliment you, and I know you're proud of him. But now tell us about your other 2 children. How old are they? And did you homeschool all 3 of them?
So I homeschooled all 3. Braden went through 2nd grade at our cute little public school before I realized that they were not accomplishing what I consider to be education, which at that time I thought education was academics. It's not. This is what we're getting wrong. A third, maybe, of education is actually academics. But what you realize after, it took me a decade to realize this. So I had 3 kids. I started with 3rd grade, 1st grade, and then, preschool, basically. What you realize is the academics, first of all, they don't take the whole day. And secondly, if you don't teach character, you're never going to get anywhere with academics, because character is what tells the child that the academics actually have value. Otherwise, the academics may not be that interesting to the child. The child's not going to devote himself. And let's face it, we won't learn anything that we don't first purpose to teach ourselves. So you can bring a horse to water, you can't make him drink. You can put a child in a classroom, you cannot make him learn. He has to first be interested in learning. And that interest either comes coerced or it comes naturally. And initially, the learning always comes naturally. We've all met 2-year-olds. They're full of questions. Why? How come? When? Where? What for? What's that? Right? And then by the time they hit school at 5 or 6 and they're told, sit down and shut up, you may not ask a question unless you first ask permission to ask a question. That's a deterrent. It's a deterrent to learning that we apply to our children in our schools. That's abusive. So by the time they finish kindergarten or 1st grade, they're done. They're like, these people don't really want to teach me anything that I want to know. Why am I bothering with these people? It's a source of, I'm sure, intense frustration for children, not to mention all of the other things that happen in the classroom.
Is Braden your oldest?
Braden's my oldest. He's 23, and I'm sure you talked to him about his 2nd book, which is called Embrace Masculinity.
We did. We had a great conversation. So did you know the responsibility that you were assuming when you decided to homeschool Braden? And it must have gone pretty well, because then you homeschooled your other 2 children. But that sounds like a tremendous amount of responsibility and an obligation that I don't know that most parents are willing to take on.
So it's actually, it's less education and it's just parenting. And what's sad is our parents are way too apt to outsource the parenting of their child to the schools. And the schools are not capable of accomplishing the parenting of children. And so we've got this huge gap of parenting. And we are now a largely unparented society, is what I've been saying for the past several years.
I could
that people
not
don't even
agree with
understand
you
how to
more.
parent, much less, what parenting actually is. I
there's just
started with all 3
certain-
kids.
Certain
Braden
jobs
was-
in life you just can't delegate. And parenting
That's
is
right.
like number 1 in my view.
That's right.
The parent has to parent.
Right. It's number 1 because it is the character formation of the child. I like to say that education is not data entry, as the schools would have you believe. It's actually a software download. And the software is your world values, your views, and your religion. That's what the software is. Once the child understands that, what is valuable in the world? What's my purpose in the world? Which, by the way, in the schools, we are teaching children they have no purpose. We are teaching them, sadly, that their purpose is college prep and career readiness, which is making money, and that is not a purpose. That's a path to destruction, frankly. If their highest value is money, and this is what we see in the swamp in DC, where the politicians value money over honor and integrity, and they make their campaign promises, they get to DC and they don't fulfill them because the money comes into the equation, and that always trumps now, because we've had generational learning on this, that money trumps everything. We would sell our grandmothers for a quarter. So when you said, I just want to backtrack for a minute,
Sure.
because you're right. I had 3 kids. I started homeschooling Braden and Shane at the same time, 3rd and 1st grade. I said to my husband, actually, at the end of Braden's 2nd grade year, I said, I think I could fail at homeschooling him, but he'll still be better off, because I understood that the character was important. And the character that was coming home from school was a perversion of what my young man could be. And so I took that on, but I'll tell you, a year and a half in, I put them back in school for 6 weeks. It was a huge mistake. I shouldn't have done it, but I felt absolutely unqualified and inept. And this is coming from somebody who studied biomedical engineering at Duke University. And I felt like a complete failure. And the reason is because our schools teach us to think that we can't. Our schools train us not to try because failure's bad. Our schools train us not to read because the teacher read it, she'll tell you what's in it, and all you have to do is regurgitate it for the test.
All right,
Our
so
schools
I'm
are training us
thinking
not to be educated.
I'm thinking in order to homeschool someone successfully, there has to be some sort of a roadmap. I think we would call that a curriculum in school. Is there a curriculum that you picked up or adapted
Yes.
adopted for homeschooling your kids?
The parent is the curriculum.
Well, what
Try
about
to wrap your head around that.
well, what
So
about
children
reading,
want
writing,
to
and
be-
arithmetic? I mean, I
What
get
about
what
it?
you're saying. Character is
Children-
ever number one, but don't you need foundational skills to do basic reading and arithmetic and being able to write? Aren't those important skills to acquire?
Well, of course, but you're putting the cart ahead of the horse. What I'm saying to you is the character of the child is much more important than those skills. And if a child learns to read at the age of 2 or at the age of 12, it's kind of the same difference. So yes, children have to learn to read, but that's easy to teach a child to read. You teach them phonetics and then you read with them every day.
Yeah,
And while you're reading with them every day, you're working on their character.
I'm just asking, where do you get the curriculum from? How do you know that this is the beginning, the middle, and the end, and here's your graduation certificate?
So there are a couple different ways to answer that. First of all, there are a plethora of curricula online that are available for purchase, and books. And there's so much. We are inundated with curricula because this is a multi-billion-dollar industry, but it doesn't have to be. If we just go back 120 years, we didn't have schools and we had the most literate populace in the world before we had schools. Then the schools came in and said, let us take over. We'll train the kids. We'll teach them the things they need to know. And we are super illiterate and we know nothing. You've got kids out there, teenagers, who think that we won the war against Canada. You've got kids who don't know that Mexico is our southern border. These children are not being educated. They're being schooled, which is an entirely different thing and a very dangerous thing. So focusing, here's the thing, focusing on curricula is the wrong focus. But I get it, because we all went to school and we learned that curricula is the answer, that education is data entry. And if I just get the right book and input it into my child, I will have an intelligent human being. It doesn't work that way, but we believe that it works that way because we went to school and that's what they taught us. And what I'm doing is I'm setting parents free from that paradigm and free from that enslavement.
I'm not really disagreeing with anything you're saying. I'm just trying to figure out how you homeschool a kid. And so I'm not challenging you on what should come first, character or the education. I just really am curious how you mechanically go about it, in terms of getting them the foundation they need to be able to go on and have a fulfilling life and a career, if it involves basic skills.
That's great. I love the fact that you said have a fulfilling life and a career, because the schools focus entirely on career, not fulfillment. In fact, they tell the child, your purpose is money. Your purpose is to have a career. That's it. And then they don't get that job done.
Don't you think society encourages that? Do you think it's all the academians' faults? I mean, that's just sort of the culture that we live in. But
why do we live in that culture? You're correct. I agree. But why do we live in that culture? Because we all went to school.
Well, I think it's also because
14 years
we
of
want
this
to
indoctrination has
keep up with
taken
the
its toll.
Joneses.
What's that?
I think we also want to keep up with the Joneses. I think it's just part of the human condition that we want to be competitive and we want to win the race. Now, my preacher used to say, if you win the rat race, you're still a rat. So I get that part of it too. But I don't think it's I don't think it is an indoctrination necessarily from the schools. They may reinforce that, but I think some of it is just the human condition, as I said, don't you?
It's an interesting question. I don't know how pertinent it is, but I think that if we go back 200 years, I don't know that we had the tremendous keeping up with the Joneses competition that we see today. I think we can point to social media and see that it's detrimental to our young people, and that's their exposure to the keeping up with the Joneses and the comparison. And we know intrinsically that comparison is the enemy of joy, is the thief of joy, right? And they used to know that culturally. We no longer know that culturally. So I lay a lot of blame at the feet of the school, because I know that the schools have the children for 13 years of indoctrination, and their indoctrination is in this mindset. So the fact that the whole culture now has that mindset, well, yeah, because the whole culture went to school. But now we see this trad trend, right? Where you've got trad wives. They want to be housewives. They want to be home. They want to be baking bread. They want to be raising their children and homeschooling them. And I welcome that as a return to the values of freedom, because when you go through 13 years of this indoctrination, you are enslaved, and it is very difficult to break free of that. And I will tell you, it took me over a decade while I was homeschooling my children to learn that the school had me enslaved. The school trained me to think about education in one way only. And it was only by the grace of God that after several years of enforcing the academics on my children, that I sort of relented and said, you know what? It's more important that you know who you are and your purpose in life and how to be happy and content than that you get into Harvard. And as luck would have it, my children have chosen not to go to college. It's not that they couldn't go to college. It's that they understood that the college professors today really have nothing to offer them. My daughter said to me once, I want to go to college to study business. And I said, that's great. Just know that basically the professors that are going to teach you business probably have never run a business before, right? And so what are you going to learn from them? You're going to learn from textbooks. Well, you can buy a textbook and read it.
So tell us what the day in the life of a student in your household was like. How did the day begin, and what was the day like, and how did it end?
So like I said, I was very academic when we started this grand experiment, which is frankly the oldest form of education known to mankind. It's actually the schools today that are the grand experiment, and they're failing. And we just have to look at the evidence and say, oh, that's a failed paradigm. Why are we still insisting on pursuing that? In my school, the kids would come down, and by 9 o'clock, they needed to be seated at the kitchen table, ready to get started on work. So breakfast had to be finished. I didn't want them getting up and going and getting breakfast while we were talking. We would start the day with some Latin, some prayer, and then we would go into our grammar curricula, which you mentioned curricula. I had Shirley Grammar, which is a grammar curriculum that I absolutely adored. What it does is it exposes the child to the order that is intrinsic in our language. And a lot of people have no idea why we use the words the way we use them. But once I started teaching the kids this grammar in this manner, they loved it, because it made language make sense to them. And children, you have to understand, children enter the world and the world looks like chaos. The curiosity that's born in a child is the child's attempt to make sense of the chaos. And when you give the child order in the chaos, you're exposing them to serenity, to peace, to understanding, oh, there's an overarching order, and I don't have to worry that it's just chaotic, everything's chaotic. And especially language, because we learn language sort of by osmosis, to then be able to parse a sentence and figure out why the language works the way that it does is tremendously comforting to a young child. So while I'm sure the adults who are listening to this are yawning because, grammar, who liked grammar in school? The kids love grammar. We approach education as adults not understanding what children actually need. After we did grammar, the kids each had a list of the different academic activities that they had to get done. They needed to get done some pages in their math textbooks or workbooks. They needed to get done some pages in their history. We would watch documentaries for lunch. And basically by 1 o'clock, we were done with our school day, and they had time to go outside and play and do some research on things that were particularly interesting for them. So when you said, well, how do you give the child the basics? The basics are easy. That's 1 or 2 hours a day. And by the way, with 3 kids, I'll just describe it for you because you seem to kind of be interested in how this works.
Sure.
You cover one thing I would cover one lesson with the oldest child while the other 2 sat there quietly or worked on some other coloring or whatever when they were young. And then I would move on to the second one. The oldest one would go off to do the homework that was part of the lesson. And then the younger one and the older one would come back to get his homework graded. And what would happen is the younger 2 would get exposed to what the older one was doing. They would all do their same history together, but maybe the older one dove a little bit deeper into the subject matter of the history, where the younger ones just colored a picture that went along with the history text or something like that. They all did spelling, and the spelling was actually automated, which was phenomenal. We had DVDs or CDs, I guess. They would listen to the spelling words, they would write them, they would grade their own papers, they would show me their papers, they would rewrite the words that they got wrong correctly 5 times, and then they would move on the next day and do basically, I think the spelling work that they would do the same lesson, they had to get it 100% 2 days in a row, and then they could move on. And they all advanced. It's just not that difficult to homeschool. It's just not that difficult. But we all went to school, and so we think, oh my gosh, that's hard, and I'm not trained, right? And that's the way we feel about everything. I can't replace a toilet. I'm not trained. Guess what? Go to Home Depot. The guy at Home Depot will tell you, this is how you replace a toilet. You go home, you follow instructions, you're done.
Or you
It's
can just
not
watch
that
a
difficult.
YouTube video these days.
Yeah, fair
The
enough.
source of all knowledge. So one thing that occurs to me, and I did ask Braden about it, I understand that academics, character, I'd heard you talk about it without identifying it explicitly. I think you do have a benefit in education of learning discipline. I needed that lesson, and so now I've learned to be self-disciplined. But if someone doesn't provide you that structure, I think it's going to be awfully difficult to become self-disciplined. But the other component that strikes me is socializing the child. How do you ensure that your homeschool child is properly socialized and learns those important skills for later in life?
What if the child doesn't want a social life? Nobody ever considers that maybe the child is not that interested in having a ton of friends. I had 2 children who each only wanted 1 friend. You could not convince them to get more friends. They didn't want them. They had no interest in having more than 1 friend. Braden, on the other hand, has over 2 million followers on TikTok. He's got friends all over the world. I go speak at a place, and I come home, and Braden goes, "Yeah, my friend Josiah was sitting next to you," and I'm like, "You already knew people in the room where I was speaking?" Like, it's crazy. So the idea that children need school to become social is absurd. Also, how are they going to learn social skills? From other little creatures the same age? Obviously not. That's Lord of the Flies.
Well, no,
That's not social training.
I think the point is you learn how to play. You learn how to play nice. And if you don't play nice, there's usually a pretty severe consequence from it.
Do you know what
The
learning
other
how
kids
to...
will gang up on you in the playground.
Yeah, that's bullying, but that's what they teach in school. Because in school, they teach survival of the fittest. They teach that that's the law of the land. So they're actually training kids in bullying or being bullied.
Now, you think the schools teach that, or is that a condition of life?
Survival of the fittest?
Yeah.
No, I don't think that's a condition of life. We live in a Christian society.
So you
Survival of the
don't
fittest is absolutely
subscribe
not
to
the condition of life.
You
It
don't
shouldn't be anyway.
You don't relate to any elements of Darwin and Darwinism.
Well, even Darwin discredited his own research. So I struggle to take it seriously when Darwin himself said this is poppycock unless we can find the missing link, which they can't find. But it's not so much that. It's that we live in a Christian society which says, do unto others as you would have done unto you. We are moving more and more towards survival of the fittest, sadly, which makes us very cynical. But we are moving in that direction because we all went to school and we're not being taught the golden rule anymore.
Now, Braden and I
we assume that it will just come into us by osmosis. That's not true.
No.
But we were talking about socialization, and I'm bringing up to you that children are not socialized in school properly. That's why we have rampant bullying in school. And to think that children will learn social skills from other children is absurd. You parents need to be teaching their children how to be social, how to behave with people, how to exert or exhibit proper manners. But parents stop doing that because they think, oh, my child will be socialized in school. That is actually a lack of parenting. A parent who thinks their child will be socialized in school is exhibiting anti-parental behavior, actually.
Well, I understand your point. I'm not sure that I'm fully there, frankly. I think that learning how to get along with others requires being with others. I just don't know how you acquire
Right.
those
Okay. But
skills
what
unless you practice them. It's like
you're making an
well,
assumption.
hang on. It's like telling someone I want you to be a star basketball player, but I only want you to go shoot free throws by yourself. I have a slightly different perspective than you do on it. And also Braden and I had a slightly different conversation, and in the context of his new book about the demasculinization of men. And so our conversation was sort of like we're dumbing everybody down so that there is not a kind of hierarchy, and that there's not masculinity and femininity in our society, that there's this blending of the sexes, and everybody's supposed to be on the same level. I'm getting very conflicting information in our interviews this morning.
Well, you asked me about socialization, and I pointed
Yes.
out to you that children aren't effectively socialized by spending a lot of time with other children. And it seems that your assumption is if they're homeschooled, they're spending no time
No.
with anybody
No,
else.
no,
And
I
of course,
don't.
that's not true.
I have no assumption about homeschooling, because and the reason I wanted to talk to you and I'm interested in this is to learn. And
Right.
it is out of pure intellectual curiosity that I'm asking you how you talked a lot about character development. I'm all on board. Talked about the foundational academic base that we all need to go through this life. You got to be able to figure out how to add up a checkbook and add and subtract. And
Which they don't teach in school.
Similarly, I was on the board of trustees of our college where I attended, and one of the things that we worried most about, we didn't obsess about it, but it came up in conversations, was that all the kids were walking to and from class with their ear pods in, or their earpieces, listening to music or God knows what else, and nobody's talking to anybody. And there is a distancing of socialization. And so that's actually kind of my concern, is that we become individual entities without the interaction with other people, which personally I derive a lot of enjoyment from. I've actually thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today, but I think I in part am able to do it because I've practiced it a lot. So it's not a criticism or a judgment. It's purely out of interest that I asked a question.
So let me speak to that. What you're seeing on college campuses is the social construct of our schools carried out. When you send a child to school to socialize with a group of children his same age, and at the same time tell him, sit quietly at your desk and do not talk to each other, that is social conditioning. That is not socialization. When you have a homeschooled student who has to talk to the bank teller because you're taking them with you in the places that you go, and they are exposed to all kinds of people of all ages, including their siblings and other homeschooled children, that is a child that can engage in conversation with people of any age, and probably is much more interested in doing so than a child that's been sequestered inside a classroom and told not to talk to other children. And so the young people that you're seeing on college campuses, to a large degree, have probably been conditioned the way that I talked about in schools. And so they take refuge in their earphones, and they are not interested in other people because they've been conditioned to think that everybody is just like them.
So are we going to miss anything by eradicating the Federal Department of Education, or are you celebrating the move? I think I know the answer.
Unfortunately, I think we won't miss anything. I think nothing's actually going to go away. And there's a push now for school choice, which I think is basically the federalization, or at least the state government takeover of all the private schools. And the private schools are so myopic that they do not understand that when you take government funds, I just spoke at a private school over the weekend, and I spoke to one of the directors of the school, and I said, where do you guys stand on school choice? You don't have it in your state yet, but I'm sure that there's a movement to get it here because it's a great big money grab, frankly. Schooling in the United States is a grift. We've seen it in our colleges. We've seen the government's involvement in our colleges through the federal loans programs for students for college and the degradation of our schools as a result of that. And so school choice is basically that, but for the undergraduate or the primary school and second and high schools, right? And so I asked him, where do you stand on school choice? And he was all for it because he wants the money because he's a private school and he thinks the money's going to really help him grow his school. And it will, but at the same time, it will help the government control his school. And that's what he wasn't aware of. I said, the moment you start taking that money, you're going to hire more teachers. You're going to have more students. This is great. Pretty soon you'll have 50 wonderful teachers. And then the government's going to say, but you have to teach, this is a Christian school. The government's going to say, but you have to teach the Quran. I mean, fair is fair. And you don't want to teach the Quran, but you also don't want to fire your 50 teachers and you don't want to leave those students out in the cold. And the government's going to say, well, you have to teach evolution. You got to teach survival of the fittest, which frankly is child abuse. How dare you tell a child that they have no purpose and that they are a series of accidents of nature? And then we wonder why children go and shoot up schools. Well, the school taught them that they have no value, and neither do any of the other students. And so when they get angry, they act out. And this is where we are today. So my message for parents is if you want to save your family, if you want to preserve your children, then you do not send them into institutions that do not have your children's best at heart, right? And training your child, raising your child yourself, and educating your child. And by the way, so the one thing that I wanted to point out, you said something which I thought was really interesting, that you needed to learn discipline. And I would put to you that once you had figured out what you really wanted to do, you would have taught yourself discipline. But we think because we have the school paradigm that's so ingrained in us that we only learn from other people, we think we need other people to teach us things.
No, I
and
kind
I'm
of
here
think I
to tell
learned it
you,
from my
you're a
dad.
parent.
When I stepped out of line, I got the backside of his belt.
Right.
And I don't resent that. I frankly think that, the Bible says, spare the rod, spoil the child. I'm not encouraging parents to go beat their children, but I am encouraging them to set appropriate limits for their children. And that when you're 3, 4, 5 years old, you got to kind of lead them along that way. I don't think that's something that we necessarily inherently know.
So sorry, you're conflating, I think, or I conflated two words, discipline and discipline. And so by punishment, you meant discipline punishment, but then you also said the discipline to pursue something, the discipline to get something done. And those are two different definitions of the word. And so, of course, parents need to discipline their children. That's how children learn right from wrong. And we need to know right from wrong,
That's
or we're
the
going to have
discipline that I was referring to.
very screwed up lives. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I misunderstood you. And yeah.
Well, that's quite all right. A fascinating conversation. I think that your children are very lucky to have such a dedicated and obviously very intelligent mom, and who is also an author. The Parent's Guide to Homeschool, Making Education Easy and Fun. Gosh, I wish I'd had you as a teacher when I was in the 4th grade. Thank you for coming on with us. And how's the book doing, and where do we get it?
The book's doing great. I encourage people to go to sorbostudios.com to order theirs. And by the way, sign up for our newsletter. That's how we stay in touch with people, because we know social media is doing some strange things like taking people down, stuff like that.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for your time today. It's been an engaging conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And I hope you have a nice rest of your weekend.
Thank you. You too. God bless.
Some future day, how AI is going to change everything. And here is Mark Beckman. He is an advertising executive in New York. He's also cursed with a JD degree from Hofstra. He and I have that sordid past in common. I didn't go to Hofstra, but I got a JD degree. I call it Lawyer in Recovery. And he also has an undergraduate from Boston College, Boston University. Mark, help us sort it out. A lot of people don't even know what AI stands for. And I think that that most of us, including myself, may have an inkling of what some of the implications are, but nowhere near a full understanding of it. Help us out.
Well, John, first of all, thank you so much for having me on your show today. It's great to meet you. Congratulations with all of your success. I know that you are what I call a slasher, like a modern guy, right? Like you're doing real estate, you're a lawyer, you got your show, you're into finance. So congratulations with all of that. I think honestly,
I keep looking for something I can be good at, you know?
We need more minds like that. And the way you set up this conversation as it relates to AI, artificial intelligence, is interesting because my book, Some Future Day, How AI is Going to Change Everything, is built exactly for your audience. It's created for beginners, for people who are curious about how artificial intelligence can be used today to improve their careers, to improve their lives as it relates to family and community. And what I do is I lay it out, John, across all the different business sectors and provide the reader with tools that he can access right away. He could access them. I give them names and links if he wants to use artificial intelligence for search, to write memorandums, to write business proposals, to draft emails, to create beautiful videos. It's all in there, whether you're in finance or in the creative industries, it's covered.
And these are not things that are coming. These are things that you're describing that are actually here and now, right?
Absolutely, John. So a lot of people come over to me and they're like, hey, Mark, like, what's the easiest way for me to start using artificial intelligence? People are afraid, John, of emerging technologies. It is a little intimidating when something new comes out into the marketplace, but they're available now. What I try to do is I direct these people towards something that they're vaguely familiar with. So I start with AI search engines, and they could leverage, I lay it all out in the book, they could leverage ChatGPT or Perplexity, and it's a much better experience than Google for a lot of reasons. I'm sure you would agree. Like, Google isn't such a great product. In fact, I think it's substandard. It's pushing advertising in our face. And then with a small text box, we end up getting a search of several links, and we got to like dig through that. If you use ChatGPT right now, you're able to get a bigger text box with no advertising, and it actually rattles out an answer for you, right? So if you're looking for a business plan or a memorandum or whatever it might be, in real time, you get the answer. And now you can have sources too. So if you want to verify that information, it's right there at your fingertips. So I think a great place for beginners to start is with search.
Okay, so do we go to ChatGPT or do we go to Grok?
Okay, good question. So these platforms are a little, with the way that they're trained, each LLM, whether it's Grok, ChatGPT, Perplexity, or China's version of it that's very popular in the States now, DeepSeek, they're all trained by the corporation that owns them, the creator, right? So Grok is owned by Elon. So if you are a person who, I'm imagining your audience is leaning more to the right, more conservative, Republican minded, you probably will enjoy Grok's answers more than perhaps something like Sam Altman's platform, ChatGPT, which tends to skew a little bit left of center. So my recommendation, though, is to consider using these various tools for different reasons. So I'll use Grok, for example, if I want to use it for search purposes. If I want to see like what's on the consciousness and what's in the news in real time, it's enormous because it's also taking all of the data from X. But if I want to take some time to build out, let's say, a business proposal, ChatGPT has a lot of good tools there. But I'll use, personally, I'm a little bit more active with AI, so I'll use several different tools within each project as well.
So you're saying, if I've heard you correctly, that there's ChatGPT, Grok, DeepSeek, and there was one other that you mentioned that I'm not familiar with.
Perplexity. It's really well done.
And who is the sponsor or owner of Perplexity?
So honestly, I forget the owner's name off the top of my head, but of interest, of note, is that Perplexity is one of the companies right now that is in the running to buy TikTok. And it would be enormously powerful because think about this, like, for example.
So maybe that's Larry Ellison?
I don't think it's Ellison.
The question I really wanted to get to, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but I want to get it before it gets lost. It sounds to me that you're inferring that even a freaking artificial intelligence platform is politicized. That if I want to go, if I'm right leaning, I'm going to go to Grok, and if I'm a little more moderate and maybe even to the left, I'm going to go to Chat GPT. Well, where is the intelligence and the ethic? You say it. How is that ethical that these sources for knowledge would be somehow politicized? That's mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, for sure. So the large language models, these LLMs, are definitely racist, sexist, and biased. And it goes beyond politics. There's no doubt about it. And it's something, actually, John, that will never be reversed. So what happens is these big companies go in and they train the LLMs on a corpus of data that's been created by humans. Think in terms of everything that's ever been written, from poetry to news articles. Think about books and beyond, right? But these are centralized business models. So the CEO and his team are effectively steering the vision of the platform. So like DeepSeek is the most dramatically biased out of all of them because they're so pro-China. So if you go into DeepSeek, or if anybody in your audience wants to try this out and ask questions about Xi Jinping, Tiananmen Square, or the Uyghurs, the answers will blow your mind. It literally denies that China is involved with slavery as it relates to the Uyghurs. It extols that Tiananmen Square actually never happened. And Xi Jinping is like considered like the leader of the free world. So
I think you've just illustrated the potential bad parts of AI. I mean, there is a large group of people who literally worry about the impact of AI on our civilization and our even our virtual existence. And I don't mean virtual from a computer standpoint. I mean our existing in the future as people.
John, this is why we are in an AI war with China. Make no mistake about it. It is critical. In fact, I believe that artificial intelligence is going to radically change American society in 3 to 5 years. And I'm not saying that to just make a bold statement. It really will become the underpinning of most business sectors. It's already happening now. In fact, that's what Elon is doing with Doge to capture all of this data. But the AI war is real, and it's on multiple levels. We're transforming warfare, but we're also transforming information and messaging. And just yesterday or the day before, it was reported in Reuters that China's started already like a propaganda engine into Taiwan through the use of generative AI to divide the nation's perspective of America, capitalism, and democracy. Because with AI, they could generate a ton of information in written format, in video, as well as in photorealistic imagery. And they're just bombarding it across social media and into the news outlets. So we are in a war. And like going back to the issue of DeepSeek and that search, think about like if our children, if the next generation are using AI to learn and they're using DeepSeek, the way that the Chinese are going to represent history will be definitely very different than the way Americans might represent history. So our children can also be influenced in a way for educational purposes that could be dangerous.
And we're just talking about the tip of the iceberg here. I mean, when you talk about artificial intelligence, the Tesla vehicle that I owned is the quintessential example of artificial intelligence because I've got full self-driving and it can take me from West Palm Beach to Miami and I don't even have to touch the steering wheel or the gas pedal nor the brake.
It's amazing, John. And now take it a step further. The data that Elon is capturing, not just with X for Grok, but also every Tesla owner who's driving is capturing data as it relates to mapping and beyond. And that data capture is super valuable. So what Elon is doing with regards to artificial intelligence, and then of course he owns Neuralink too, where that's the company where he's putting chips in brains, and I actually think it's a good thing.
It may be one
It's
of the most
remarkable.
exciting inventions that he's working on. To be able to give people with paralysis the ability to walk and to recover from their life.
Yeah, and that technology, actually, I talk about it in my book, John. There's an office of doctors here in the New York area that have embedded chips into the brains of paralyzed patients. And basically what they do is the surgery creates a bypass of neuron messaging that goes across the area that's kind of dead in the brain. So it bypasses that area, and it triggers both feeling and movement, as you've articulated. It's remarkable. The advances that we're going to see in medicine because of AI are just so profound. And this is why I say AI will definitely improve our society radically within 3 to 5 years. It's all happening.
Now, when I was in college, a very long time ago, if we went to the encyclopedia and copied text from it, or from a book for that matter, and copied the text without giving attribution, they would kick you out of school. It was called plagiarism. It was called cheating. Yet you're directing us to ChatGPT and Grok to write our term paper and our final exam question.
I think artificial intelligence is an incredible tool for research purposes. It creates a leveling effect, and in certain ways, it impacts that traditional westernized university level education that you got, right? If you want to come to NYU today, you're going to end up spending about $100,000 a year. It's astronomical. So a lot of people who are in the lower socioeconomic demographic can't afford that. But now, let's face it, everybody's got a mobile phone, and everybody can access that information that gave you a foundation for a wonderful career. Take it a step further, which is really exciting. They could also then use artificial intelligence to say, okay, I've learned, I am really intrigued by this financial business model. How could I turn it into a business, and how would I run the business? And AI can also be used to show the individual who never went to Harvard, Yale, or Princeton how to stand up that new financial business and help activate. So it's going to create a tremendous amount of value and wealth in our society. It's going to create more jobs. It's going to create more value for entire communities as it relates to advances in medicine, as well as access to food, food security, and beyond.
So you represent, through your advertising agency, some of the most iconic companies in our country, including Pepsi and others. How are you using AI to help develop advertising campaigns, and does it influence your work at all?
Yeah, it certainly does, John. We're using AI in two ways. The first part, I think, is the most important, but the least sexy: data analytics. So no longer does a CEO of, let's say, a massive consumer goods company need to rely on a team of data analysts to look at the data, make conclusions, come back in 30 to 45 days, and provide information to the CEO. CEO now, in real time, can do the analysis himself, or a CMO, since you asked about advertising specifically, can look at how he's deploying his budget across social media platforms. And he could see that maybe he's getting more traction at the top of the funnel and then actually sales at the bottom of the funnel with Instagram and TikTok as commerce versus Facebook. And he could quickly, in real time, redeploy those funds in the areas where he's getting the most traction. So data is the number one way that we're using it, data analytics. But the fun part is about standing up the campaign. So how many people have you come across that are like just always dreaming of launching, I'm going to launch my own whiskey, I'm going to launch my own cigar company, I'm going to launch my own fashion house. Well, now that fashion designer wannabe could create their own brand name, their own logo, their primary packaging, secondary packaging. They could design their own suit, their own dress. They could pre-sell on e-com and promote with social media and get paid if they want with crypto in any format and eliminate really the competition and the risk. A lot of friends that we have, in fact, I have clients now who are building out product, including, like, for example, in Christmas ornaments, pre-selling. And then once the orders come in, they take the risk and start building. And we're going to see a lot of these challengers come in play, creative challengers that want to go after the big fashion houses, Kering, LVMH, but don't have the money or the know-it-all. Now they could do it.
It's just fascinating. So, Elon Musk, we've talked about his full self-driving. We've talked about Neuralink. The one thing that we haven't talked about is his humanoid robot, otherwise known as Optimus. He thinks everybody in the world is going to have a little Optimus buddy to wash their dishes and iron their clothes. What are you thinking?
I think it's great. Let's face it. Optimus or Optimus-like robots are going to free up people from a lot of the tasks that we all hate, right? We spend so much time cleaning, folding laundry, cooking, running errands. And what I think is going to happen in short order is the first stage is going to be these task-oriented robots will be shared within communities. So, John, maybe you and two of your neighbors to make it more cost efficient will share a robot, and that robot will run to the local public supermarket and pick up some food and stock it in your shelves and do your laundry, and it will be cost efficient. But here's the thing. Robots are here. They're here already. Like, for example, think military. Drones are really becoming majorly important. I think that Pete Hegseth is going to step out and make some serious investment as it relates to drones. These are robots, and they're going to come into play for not just attack, not just search and rescue, but for security as well. So private security, home security, businesses that require security, it's all going to change, and it's all powered by artificial intelligence.
So if we all have robots, and I agree, what I've read is that they're being designed in 1.0 to do repetitive, menial, and dangerous tasks. But don't they also have the potential to kind of replace a lot of what we do in life? And does it run the risk of stripping us of our self-worth if we've got this machine that's going to do all this stuff for us? Does that even make sense as I'm trying to describe it?
Yeah, I think that's interesting when you talk about self-worth. To get a little philosophical with you for a second, if I may, I think the happiest people are those who are very productive.
I agree
and
with
productivity can come in several different ways. It could be, building your own company, working. It could be some of those chores that you do at home, and it could be even, lending your time towards a charity that you love. But I'm sure you would agree, John, even the wealthiest people, if they're not productive, they're not happy. And I think that's an issue.
That's why at 72 years old, I'm still working as hard as I did when I was 50 years old. And, I have the opportunity to live a pretty nice lifestyle. I've worked my butt off since I was 12. I've saved, I've invested. I'm sitting down here in South Florida enjoying the fruits of my labor. But frankly, being a country club boy and hanging out with the guys and gossiping about our friends and drinking all day just has zero appeal to me. If I'm not doing something, I'm not really happy. So I get your point, lock, stock, and barrel, but I just don't know that most people are wired that way. And, I guess I do worry about ushering in the golden age and the notion of an age of abundance. Are we qualified and capable of handling it? I think is what I worry most about.
Yeah, unfortunately, I do not think that we as a society right now are capable. And the reason I say that is if you look at our next generation, young millennials, Gen Z, even Gen Alpha, there's a part in my book I talk about this. They are literally amusing themselves to death with the most ridiculous content on social media. They are sitting there and doom scrolling across TikTok through all hours of the night, not learning anything, and just literally amusing themselves to death. But yet, Look at where TikTok comes from, China, a place that is now restricting access to the next generation. Here in New York City, the New York City government banned government employees from downloading the app on their phones 2 years ago. We don't talk about this for some reason, but it's official. There's a reason why. But yet, the next generation is just sitting there and they are nonstop on their phones, on their iPads, gaming and amusing themselves to death. And I think it's problematic. And maybe it's from parents being lazy. Maybe it's from kids being too dominant. But we do need to be in touch with nature. We do need to be in touch with non-device, non-technological experiences to make sure that our minds are working at the highest level, and we're creating and innovative and entrepreneurial and growing both individually and as a nation.
Well, it seems like you touch on two really important points there. One is the quality of life component. And, I try and stay relevant. So I go to social media. I try and see how The Truth with John Gordon is trending on social media. Maybe AI can help us break through the YouTube algorithm and we'll get more followers. Being able to have people like you on our show certainly helps. But I too can be succumb to lingering on social media for ridiculous amounts of time when I start clicking on the reels and I start watching all these short videos. They are entertaining, they're mindless, and they're incredibly time consuming. So I find myself having to consciously break away from it. If I were younger and less experienced in life, maybe I wouldn't do so. But I also think that you talked about data collection. Isn't the big fear with TikTok that China owns it and that they're just collecting massive amounts of data and information on our entire populace that could be used for bad purposes?
Yeah, that's certainly a big part of it for sure. I don't think people realize the extent of how much data they're giving up just by using TikTok as well as by using their phone. I mean, all day long, your habits, think in terms of like when you log onto TikTok, they know who you are, they know where you are, they know what you're swiping, they know what you're looking at, what you're interested in, how you're spending time. They could locate you, geolocate you. It goes on and on and on. They have maybe access to your credit card. That's, very common. People are boosting posts and advertising. It's an incredible tool that they've built. It's the best social media tool, and it's the lead tool for S-commerce. So they have access to financial data, access to your personal data with your driver's license and beyond. So yeah, there's a big risk there. A lot of people aren't reading the terms and conditions of apps that are not just American, but Chinese too. I mean, there's a similar issue. We mentioned DeepSeek, the Chinese AI app earlier, and there's a massive problem with that. With DeepSeek, John, DeepSeek's terms and conditions expressly state that your information is going to be stored on their servers in China. The Chinese government allows for access to any Chinese companies that are storing data in China. So all of a sudden, friends of yours who are CEOs and uploading proprietary information for their companies, that are uploading, their personal information to use the app, their driver's license, etc. That's all fair game for China now. So people really need to start paying attention to what they're doing. They need to start reading terms and conditions.
Well, and there's this hefty amount of, and I don't know whether it's justified or not, skepticism about people inviting Alexa into their house, who we fear has the potential to listen to every word that we speak. She certainly knows what products we buy off of Amazon, and reminds us frequently that we might be out of Crest toothpaste and don't we want to reorder it. But you invite Optimist into your house, and they're going to live with you, and they've got video cameras, which is how the Optimist is going to see and navigate. They're going to know every single secret that you possess. I mean, the Optimist will be able to do everything short of reading your mind. Maybe able to do that before it's all said and done.
So the feature that you're talking about is built by a lot of companies, and they can actually access what you're searching for as well as what you're speaking about vis-a-vis your phones too.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of people all of a sudden, John, like you and I could have a conversation about taking a trip together for, we want to take a fishing trip together this summer. And then all of a sudden we're being pushed all these advertisements surrounding a specialized fishing trip.
Yeah, Orvis all of a sudden shows up on your doorstep in your cell phone.
Totally. So people need to realize that exists, and usually it's turned on. And what they need to do is toggle within their app to turn off what is considered by many to be a feature. So as the owner of an advertising agency, we love that. And I think one of the biggest ways that artificial intelligence is going to radically alter our relationships as consumers is no longer will we be bombarded with useless information from retailers. Consumer customization actually will create utility, but with that comes access to your personal information, your interests, your likes, your dislikes, and beyond.
One of the things that's just perplexing to me that you could probably answer, why did DeepSeek have such a profound negative impact on NVIDIA? I'm not aware that they really cross over or compete with one another, but surely there must be something there that I'm missing.
Yeah. What DeepSeek did is incredible. DeepSeek was created by a Chinese man in the hedge fund business in China, and many believe that China helped finance for years DeepSeek and the hedge fund. So there are some arguments that China is behind this. And what they did was they undercut the American industry significantly. When they launched DeepSeek, it was a shiny silver object in the AI space to American consumers because it was accessible for no money. It was free. This is in stark contrast to what some people perceive as the expensive prices of OpenAI and ChatGPT, an American entity, as I noted earlier. Now, what's interesting is the argument was that DeepSeek went in and did not need to rely on NVIDIA's super chip, which is super expensive. What they did was they restructured the way that their generative AI worked and created a predicting tool with regards to their LLM and referencing that didn't require the amount of hardware, the amount of compute, and they were able to undercut NVIDIA by putting less expensive chips in there. And what happened was at the time, NVIDIA really had a moat around it. Financially, it was just the only game in town. All the big tech companies from Google to Microsoft to Amazon, they were all relying on these super chips from NVIDIA. And NVIDIA was charging them a fortune. They were literally charging tens of thousands of dollars for one chip. Well, what DeepSeek did was really, really catastrophic to NVIDIA. They ripped that moat apart and they showed a couple of things. First, they showed maybe this protectionism that the Biden administration put into place as it relates to chips doesn't really work. There are rumors that, in fact, NVIDIA was selling some of its chips, backdooring them through Singapore to get to the Chinese company. But moreover, and more importantly, DeepSeek was accessing less expensive chips and showing most consumers don't need to have the entire package that they get with regards to accessing the information on a tool like ChatGPT. They just need the end result. We just want to know the answer to our question. So with a lower quality chip, DeepSeek was basically able to get the same effect as ChatGPT, its competitor, and it turned the whole market upside down.
It certainly did. Will NVIDIA reclaim their leadership position?
I think so. There's such a huge demand right now, John, but a lot of companies, US-based companies like Amazon and Google, they're also they're building their own chips now because they realize that NVIDIA is just truly the only game in town. There are other companies that are also like coming up and challenging NVIDIA now. Like I think there's one brand that's called Grox with an X at the end, not to be confused with the AI search engine Grok, that's doing exactly what NVIDIA is doing. And there will be other challengers to NVIDIA. But in the meantime, NVIDIA still remains the most powerful, the most reliable chip maker on the planet.
So I'm an early adapter. Do you have any conduit to Elon Musk?
So Elon does pop into my Spectre from time to time, but we don't work directly together.
Well, you and I probably don't know each other well enough yet for me to impose and ask a favor of you. I just want to be, like I said, I'm 72 years old. I don't know how much runway I have left, but I want an Optimus robot for my house.
I love it.
I want to
yeah.
be a beta tester.
I love it. I love it. Me too, man. You and I both. I want a lot of robots. I want them all over the place. And obviously I'm a tech optimist, and I truly do believe that AI is going to make the world a better place. It already is.
Some future day, it sounds like that day is here. How AI is going to change everything is the book. And we have just had a wonderful conversation with Martin Beckman. How do people buy the book, Mark, and where can we follow you?
Yeah, John, thank you so much. So people can follow me on X, on YouTube, on Instagram, all platforms. It's at Mark Beckman, MarcBeckman. And it's a great time to buy the book. The book here, I'll hold it up. I have a copy of it. The book, Some Future Day, How AI is Going to Change Everything, is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, Target, major booksellers. But the reason I say it's a good time to buy this is because it's sold out of Amazon. It's sold out on Barnes & Noble, and they just restocked. So
well,
it was number one in AI.
Congratulations on the success of your book. I'm not surprised, and you're one smart guy, and it's been the fastest 30 minutes I've spent in a long time. Thank you for coming on The Truth.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. I really appreciate it, John. Have a great day.
Come back soon. I think we'll have a lot to talk about.